You're listening to Women Are the Journey with your hostess with the mostest. That's right, me, Audrey Groeschel. We've got all your journeying here. We've got the story of the shift, where women entrepreneurs talk about their own unique journey on the road of owning a business as a woman. We have the journey of Chew on This, where I talk about the masculine structures of our society, how they hinder women in particular, but all of us in general. We'll open up the potentials of what a balance of feminine and masculine can give to us and to our planet. Join me as we explore the infinite possibilities of a journey of balance and transformation. Howdy, everybody. You are going to dig today's guest on Women Are the Journey and today's story of the shift. Today we have Megan Hale. She's the founder of Wild and Holy, a spiritual community of coaches, therapists, helpers, and healers who value expansion, growth, vulnerability, and bravery. She leads retreats and group programs for women and facilitates one-on-one coaching for both individuals and couples who crave more truth, trust, and transformation. She's the podcast host of Wild and Holy Radio, the realest conversation on spirituality and creating a life that honors your soul. Through her own healing journey of self-sabotage and spiritual warfare, Megan learned the hard way the damage we bring ourselves when we doubt our own belonging, deservingness, and divinity. She now teaches others how to step into their wild and holy truth, trust themselves more, and expand into their fullest expression to make their unique impact in the world. Her most recent container, Wild and Holy Year, which begins March 5th, has just 3 spots left for coaches, therapists, helpers, and healers ready to have their own breakthroughs so they can show up braver and help others have their own. Enrollment briefly reopens on February 14th, and you'll find her link in the bio. You're really going to dig a lot of the stuff that she has to say. She's full of wisdom and all kinds of usable tips and really just sort of amazing things that just drop out of her mouth. One of her best quotes was, "It's not so much about fearing less as much as it is about trusting more." She also talks about her 3 pillars that hold her up, the biggest lie we tell ourselves, and blending in the feminine to your business. Please welcome in the lovely Megan Hale. All right, welcome into Women Are the Journey. We are talking with Megan Hale today, and we are going to be on the story of the shift. Welcome, Megan. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Audrey. I'm so excited to see you.
I'm so excited to have you here. It's been far too long since we've talked.
Mm-hmm.
I want to dive right in and get started on getting to know where you are in your journey right now. I want you to tell everybody where you're at, and then we'll dive back into a little bit of history. So where are you at right now?
I am about 8 weeks away from having my second baby boy.
Woohoo!
And really leaning into getting to know who I am as a mom. I've been a mom for a year and a half now, which has gone by so fast.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that I haven't really spent as much time as I would have liked, like really integrating this new role of my life. So I've been creating more space for that and getting to know me as a mom and also a businesswoman and as a wife and all of these other relationships that I have in my life. And that's been a really great space to be in lately.
That sounds awesome. And what a great presence of mind that you have to be aware of integrating all of those. They're not really personalities, but they are pieces of your being. You know, that's awesome.
I mean, I think a lot of my own personal journey has incorporated a lot of integration work of different pieces of me. Like there's the 5-year-old me that holds all the messages of worthiness and enoughness and what it means to be a woman. And there's the rebellious teenager me who had to do things her own way and was so solid in self-preservation. And I love her because she's courageous and bold and just doesn't care what other people think. And I need to call on her wisdom sometimes. And most recently, I've been integrating church girl Megan, all the religious messages around what it meant to be a woman and what the divine meant and how that has shaped who I am and rewriting some of those rules to find more freedom. So I love integration. I think it's fascinating and super fun. So this
That's,
mother role is just like another facet of me that I'm getting to know.
that's awesome. I love that. All right, so let's get started. And we're going to go into, say, your top 4 choices of when you had sort of those crisis moments where life throws all those curveballs at us. And it's that learning moment where we have to make those choices of either stepping into it, leaning into it, making the choice, or falling into the abyss. So if we
Yeah.
could, what would you say would be your first choice moment that has shaped this journey for you right now?
So I've been in the coaching world for 2.5 years full time. And before that, I was in the psychotherapy field.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my dream was always to be a psychotherapist. I loved personal development work. I loved helping people learn how to create authentic lives, create happiness. And so, I went through all the training, went through all the grad school, opened the private practice, like achieved the dream.
Yeah.
And it wasn't everything that I wanted it to be. There was a new calling on my heart to do something different, to have a bigger reach, to have a bigger impact. And I knew that I needed to kind of shift gears into a different business framework in order to do that.
Right.
And that's when I started looking at coaching. And at the time, the crisis was, does this really make a whole lot of sense? Because I've just spent a good deal of time, energy, money pursuing this dream, and I finally have it. Does it make sense to go in this totally different direction? And a lot of my colleagues at the time, when I was considering going into coaching, they were like, why would you do that? Why would you forfeit your licensure that you just worked so hard to get? Why would you go into this totally different field when you're already having so much success, which I was.
Yeah.
I was already teaching other mental health therapists. I was leading workshops, and I was making a name for myself really early on in my career.
Wow.
But the crisis moment was I knew there was something different on my heart, and I had to listen to that. And it was scary, but I did it anyway, even though it didn't make sense. Here we are. And I'm so glad I made that decision.
But that's awesome.
But huge crisis moment.
So how long was the crisis moment for you? Like if you look back on it, how long did you sit and sort of ponder?
I think for me, it was probably about a 6-month period.
Wow.
Because there's the realization, and then I'm a chewer. I chew on things for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, what is this about? Is this really my truth? Is this something that my ego is doing? Is this really a true calling? And then I kind of look at, well, what would happen if I did pursue? I mean, I really go into kind of information gathering mode.
Right.
Do some research.
Yeah.
Then I have to do the emotional work of really preparing myself to take a leap like this when there's all of these red flags of like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't the logical thing to do. But in my experience, the soul very rarely asks us to do the logical thing.
Yeah.
And probably one of the first business moments. I've had that happen in relationships several times, but the first time in a business moment where that happened, and I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to do it anyway. So 6 months later, I was ready to kind of take the leap and make those shifts and haven't looked back since.
That's awesome. And you were scared still at that point.
I think you're always scared. There's like some piece of you that is always scared, like at every single point of the journey, because fear is kind of like the passenger to expansion. Anytime we're continuing to expand to go into the unknown, like fear is going to be present. It's normal and it's human. And I think we create all kinds of stories around it that if the fear is there, then does this mean that this is wrong or this is right? And it's like, it's just fear. It's not good or bad. It's just there.
That's a great way of putting it. I love that. Thank you so much for even saying that. It's a great companion. And I always feel like fear is the companion that you need that tells you that you're moving in the direction that's best for you.
Yeah. It's like a little bit of that resistance of like you're stretching against that waistband, right?
Yeah.
And it's like there's something coming on the other side of this, and I can feel it, and I'm scared to take the leap. but that's a good sign that you're growing.
That's exactly the way I look at it. That's awesome. So give me another story. What happened next?
Well, I actually launched a pretty good success in my coaching practice. So within the first 2 months, I had already made like my first 5-figure month, which was awesome.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. And then this other thing happened. Like, this should feel really good, but it didn't.
Wow.
Because I was trying to follow somebody else's blueprint and define success by somebody else's terms instead of my own. And I started realizing very quickly that I was on this hamster wheel of like striving and achieving and doing all these things in order to prove this sense of like worthiness, which was the first time that I started to become aware of it. It's shown up like a million different ways in a million different outfits in my life.
Right. As it usually does.
But I realized kind of quite quickly, I was like, if I don't shift what I'm pursuing and how I'm showing up in my life, like nothing that I achieve will ever feel like enough, because enoughness doesn't exist out there. It exists in here. So I actually made the really tough decision to quit my business for several months and figure out what in the world I was doing, which also did not make a lot of sense because you have financial success. Everything's going well. Like you're building momentum. And it's like, yeah, but this is like, there's a very big piece of me that's missing in this. And I need to figure out what that is. So I needed a lot of permission back then because I was super scared to do that. Because I had been, even though I just launched my business, those first 2 months, I had been building some visibility the year before to kind of prepare for this leap. And I remember that time being like, I was so scared of what are other people going to think if I just disappear?
Yeah.
Am I going to be this person who's independable or can't cut it or can't hold the stress of it? Or there are all these kinds of messages.
Right.
And I remember it took like, I needed permission from several different people, including myself, that it was okay to take a step back and reevaluate, and the world wasn't going to fall apart, which we often think the world will indeed fall apart.
Yes. Yes, we do. Yeah. So how long did that take for you to come to that decision? How long did you chew on that?
Not that long. It was really probably about like a month-long process. Because like when something's out of alignment for me, like I feel that really intensely, and I know like that's a very big warning sign to me that like something's not right.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily need to know what isn't right in order to take action. The fact that the misalignment is present and there is enough for me to say something needs my attention.
Right.
And I need to go inward and attend to that. So that process was pretty quick. And then the work itself was about 4 months to really redefine what enoughness meant for me. And it's beautiful because that ended up launching a podcast, group programs, like a whole nother thing, which has a beautiful piece of my work that continues to feed me and everybody else who, tunes into the podcast and comes in contact with the work. So that's pretty awesome.
Absolutely. Your Enoughness Revolution podcast was amazing. Absolutely. So what happened after that as far as making that choice? You had those 4 months. And then just as a side note, how was your husband at that moment?
My husband is, he is probably like one of the most supportive human beings like I've ever met. So when I was going through all this, and like full disclosure, like I still had my private practice was still winding down at that point. So I didn't just quit both. I had another business that was sustaining. So although I was being rocked emotionally inside, like financially, nothing was really majorly shifting. I just wasn't bringing in any new income from the new business.
Right.
And I started talking to, so a lot of my enoughness work was inner child work. And I started talking to my husband about my inner child, and he was like, are you like, okay, like, what is that? I found it so fascinating. And then one of the most beautiful things happened is that he started to like, include my inner child in some of our conversations.
Aww.
Like be in this like place of deep fear or uncertainty, he'd be like, I think that's, little you being afraid right now. And it was actually a really beautiful moment of connection for us. So
How wonderful. Because I think that that's one of the important things about our journeys is the support or lack of support that we get from our significant others, whether, no matter what relationship we're in. And I think that your husband sounds amazing anyways, but that is incredible that he's willing to do all of those things for you. I love it. I love it.
He's wonderful.
Obviously, he's with you, right?
Okay.
Okay, so what's next on that journey? What comes after your enoughness realization?
So everything starts going really great. And I find out I'm pregnant, which is oftentimes like the case. Like when we're in this beautiful place of expansion, it's like there's enough space for something new to come through.
Absolutely.
And so I remember like that first year of doing this enoughness work and being pregnant and anticipating this child, everything was really, really great. And then when I had the baby, I ended up having a really difficult delivery.
Yeah.
A really scary delivery, which I talk about on the podcast. Yep. And I had this moment where like I could have died. And it was a super vulnerable time for both Breck and I because we realized how much we could have lost. Mm. And I asked myself like a really big question at that time of like, this man, like you are obviously so enough for this man. You've been talking about enoughness this whole past year.
Right.
But there's a difference between talking about it and standing in it. Mm. And what would happen if you truly stood in it? Wow. And the first answer that popped up is I would be brave. And so since my son has been born, this whole past year and a half has been about letting bravery be my metric for success, which ironically led to another huge crisis moment where I had been building this beautiful community on the enoughness revolution and yes. around this worthiness work and how we really define these concepts for ourselves so we can be braver. Mm-hmm. And along the lines of 2016, there's all this stuff happening in the political climate and there's a lot of things happening and coming up to the surface for me. And I realized one of the biggest pieces of our enoughness that I hadn't talked about is really defining your own divinity on your own terms, giving yourself permission to worship the way that feels good, to define God in a way that feels good, to have your own personal relationship with this entity in your life.
Right.
That is like such a big piece of our worthiness.
True.
That I got the call to start a whole nother podcast. And at the time, I'm part of a podcast mastermind that meets every 2 weeks. And I was like, everything's going really well in the enoughness revolution. Like our downloads continue to like increase every month. Like there's a lot of engagement. And I think I'm going to actually end that and start another podcast. They're like, no. Like just rebrand it. It'll be fine. And I sat with that for like 2 weeks and I was like, no, like it's like the enoughness work needs to be its own thing, its own pillar.
Right.
And Wild and Holy Radio, it needs its own space, its own voice, its own vibe. It needs to be its own thing. Mm-hmm. And so I went and did another very illogical thing. And I started a whole other podcast, which is still super young. I mean, there were not even 20 episodes in yet.
Oh, wow.
And some of the content that I'm talking about on that podcast is probably some of the best. Like I'm the most proud of the content that I'm sharing because it feels edgy. It feels bold.
Cool.
And it feels brave.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So
that's
that feels
awesome.
Good. Mm-hmm.
So let's go back a little bit and look at all of these moments, if you will, those crisis moments. Did you have conscious awareness that you were stepping into crisis moments?
In the beginning, I don't think so. I think it kind of like slapped me across the face and like shook me pretty good, honestly.
Yeah.
And before I knew what was happening, because it's like everything was going good,
right.
going well by other people's expectations.
Right.
And it kind of it would come in as this curveball, and I'd be like, what is this about? Like, isn't this what I always wanted?
Yeah.
And it's like, why does this keep happening? What is that about? But now, like the most recent decision that I've had to make in my business is, Wild and Holy has taken on this beautiful life of its own. I mean, retreats and events and coaching
Yeah.
programs and a new podcast. And I actually had my first live event scheduled for June of next year.
Yeah.
It was a done deal. Like I had secured the venue. Like I saw the vision. I knew, I just like, when you have that knowing that it's like, this is totally going to be
Yeah.
a success.
Yeah.
And about a month ago, and I could see this one coming though. And that's a little bit of the difference is that I could feel the tinge of like something like this is starting to feel forced, pressured. That's that misalignment piece again. So what piece is misaligned? And it's like I don't have the space and energy and resources to make this event what I know it's going to be with this other baby coming.
Right.
And I need to create more space for myself. And that took about, 2 weeks of really giving myself permission to do that. But I saw it coming this time.
How interesting.
And I didn't make it bad or wrong.
Right.
Either. Which I've done in the past of like, oh, this feels like a step back. This feels like I'm giving up. This feels like, another stop in the business.
Yeah, it's all that self-judgment that we, kick our own butts with. That's just a problem. But it's awesome that you did that. But it sounds like you sort of even narrowed down your time frame of having those moments happening. Like you're not even chewing on it as long as you were 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think that being in business for yourself really strengthens your leadership. And I think you can be a lot more decisive and you understand yourself a lot more the longer you're in it. So I think you're lowering the learning curve each time, something like that happens. And it's not as scary to make those big calls as it once was because you have all this experience that like the world really does not fall apart if you take some time for yourself,
Yes. Despite all evidence that shows in your head that it will fall apart, the evidence outside says, no, it won't. And it's reconciling those two visions and being able to move them into like what's best for you.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces is learning to discern what is right for you versus all the other messages that come in constantly.
Yeah.
What you should do or what business should look like or what life or love should look like.
Yeah. All those terrible 4-letter word shoulds. I can't stand that word. I think it should be like, we need to eliminate that from the entire language. Should is the worst word that we have. I do. I believe that. I think that it creates so much angst and pain in ourselves. And because we do it to everybody else as well as ourselves, we're shoulding everything. It's just terrible. But okay. That's beside the point. What I want to know this time though is you said that you saw this coming this time. You could see it coming. And so my curiosity about this is with these moments that we have that come up to us, we have so many different ways of being able to deal with them when they're there. And it sounds like each time you've done a much better job of dealing with it and you're not diving, like the 6 months into, oh my God, and ripping your hair out. And what do I do? And this is terrible this way and awful and wonderful. And what do I do? So now moving forward, you just had this moment right now where you saw it coming. You were able to be calm about it. You spent 2 weeks figuring it out. What happens moving forward? Like, are you going to be able to, like, is there some kind of trigger? Is there something that comes up that happens that emotionally ticks and you go, oh, wait, there it is. There's that thing that I need to pay attention to?
I think for me personally, this is going to be a part of like my own spirituality is that Like when a boat is meant for you,
Mm-hmm.
that boat's still going to be waiting in the dock, like waiting for you. Like it's not, no one else is going to steer that ship. It's your
Okay.
steer. And I think knowing that, like knowing that this wild and holy vision, knowing that the community I'm building, the group of women that I'm bringing together to be braver together, like that's my ship. There's no doubt, like there's such a deep knowing about that,
Yeah.
that when the fears come up, it's kind of like, that's just old stuff. Like that's not even truth, right? And I
Right.
think my relationship to fear has changed so much. So I used to think it was about fearing less. And we really need to deal with that inner critic and like dealing and eradicate the fear and get rid of the fear and all this stuff. And then I realized this past year that it's not as so much about fearing less as much as it is about trusting more. And when I direct my energy into trust and faith, it doesn't matter what fear is doing. Like it can do whatever it wants to do, because trusting more grounds you into what is real and what is true. And it becomes kind of like this very protective shield around you. Like this is where you belong. This is your home. And fear can dance around all it wants to on the outside and throw lots of fireworks and try and get your attention. And you might do an awe over it, several times. But the more you know what truth feels like for you, and the more you trust in that truth, which includes trusting in yourself and trusting in the divine, you know your way home. And it's a lot easier and quicker to get home when that doubt or that fear kind of tries to shake you.
I love that. And it's funny because I was going to ask you, like, what would be the tools that you would use? What tools are you using to, because so many times we fall down the rabbit hole when these crisis moments happen. And we wallow in that rabbit hole wondering what on earth we're supposed to do. And we find our tools again, and then we get better at it, just like you've done. You've gotten better at it, and you know more rabbit holing. And you just described the most brilliant tools ever. And I love that. And I was going to ask you that. Now I don't even need to, because you just talked about it. It was brilliant. I love it. Faith and trust. And so if you were working with someone, if you were telling them in their moment of crisis, what would be the best thing that you could say to them?
Well, there's several things. There's a mantra. So I think that there's like one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves, and I think this is just human in general, like men and women, is we tell and I think maybe women a little bit more now that I'm thinking about it. But when we hit moments of crisis, we say, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know what this means.
So true.
And those 3 words, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not true. You do know. And the mantra that supports that knowing is, I know what I need to know when I need to know it.
I love that.
That reaffirms that even if there is a lack of clarity right now, it doesn't mean it's forever. It's just what I need to know hasn't arrived yet. And all I know right now is that it hasn't arrived yet. And that's all I need to know. You will know when it arrives. And it's very comforting to me to be in that place of limbo or uncertainty, because my business coach shared this quote with me just this past week, and it just smacked me across the face real good. I was like, whew, man, that was so true. She said, your success in business will depend on the relationship you have with uncertainty.
Ooh.
And that, if I could look back along my journey, like even life journey, of feeling more grounded in who I am and being able to stay steady when I'm being rocked, it's learning to deal with my relationship with fear by trusting more, and learning how to be more comfortable in uncertainty, which is all about vulnerability. Yeah. And those 2 things, those are like the 2 pillars. And I would say if there's a 3rd pillar in there, it's discernment, of discerning what is fear versus intuition, what is your truth versus other people's truth. Like discernment is a really big piece in zeroing in on the right decision for you.
I love that. That's brilliant. One other question with this. because where business is concerned, these attitudes and this way of thinking and this way of being is so not what you're talking about. The business environment is cold, comparatively speaking. What you're talking about is warmth and the coziness of the fireside with, your favorite spirit, so to speak, God, goddess, whatever, whoever it is for you, sitting right next to you at the fireside, keeping you warm and holding your hand. It's so not what we associate with business.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, I think it's very uniquely things that are happening right now in the world, but I also think that it's such a uniquely feminine thing. And I wonder if there's anything that you can add to that.
I think a successful business, it makes room for both the masculine and the feminine.
Yes.
Because we need the masculine, we need the structure, we need the focus, we need the drive, we need the motivation, we need like the parameters and the metrics. Those are important things we can't overlook.
Absolutely.
But yet we also need the flow, we need the intuition, we need the surrender, we need the co-creation, we need the what are the things that are going to make us feel held and supported and nourished so we can further nourish our business and the people who are coming into our business to receive our support. And I think when you because in the beginning, I really created this black or white, either or thing.
Yeah.
And it's very much in my masculine. And the masculine, when it is not balanced, becomes very rigid, very focused, very forced, and very controlling, and very attached. And attachment is one of those things that will create a lot of stress for you.
Yeah.
Because we can, I think, attach things from an ego place and attach things from a soul place. And these feel totally different.
Yeah.
Attachment from a soul place feels more feminine to me. It's more like a knowing. I don't need to worry. Whereas attachment from the ego and the masculine is like, this has to happen. Because if this doesn't happen, this means XYZ about me or my business, or it has a story attached to it.
Well, and that story is usually a failure story if it's not right.
So it's a very black and white story, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
If it doesn't happen, then it's this, which failure doesn't exist. Like that's not a real thing. We create things. It's kind of like imperfection. That's another concept that we make up. Like imperfect doesn't exist. Everything is all perfect all time, including us.
Yes.
So I would say learning to blend in the feminine and bring the feminine into your business is learning to work in a different way. And I think those components of trust and faith, like that's where those have come from.
Yeah.
Because I realize that I'm not always driving the car. Something else needs to drive the car.
Right.
And I can be this awesome passenger. But it's so much more of a co-creation and a dance. And I don't have to do everything myself.
Yeah.
And that takes the burden off. And it just relieves a lot of pressure in how I'm showing up for myself. And makes room for all of these other beautiful things,
I love it. Thank you. Thank you for your words of wisdom, for being here with me. I've so enjoyed our time together. I definitely am going to look forward to what happens with Wild and Holy. Please, I would offer you this moment as well. Go ahead and plug Wild and Holy or your Enoughness Revolution, because honestly, from my standpoint, I can't recommend you high enough. I think Megan is wonderful, you people, let me tell you. And the Wild and Holy, boy, I mean to tell you, I was so sad when I read that you had sort of canceled the June one, because I was like, oh, I wanted to do that one.
And it's still going to happen. It's just like, it's going to happen when there's enough space and time and resources with this next little baby coming, because I care so much about the events that I offer and the experiences that I help co-create. And that's the other beautiful thing. I think leaning into a feminine side of business is that you realize that you're always in co-creation with like the people who are working with you.
Yeah.
And that has allowed me to show up so much more fully and just as myself and know that I'm enough. and that the work that needs to happen is going to happen because it's between me and this other person. So it's not going to be in June, Wild and Holy Live, but whenever it does happen, it's going to be amazing and powerful, and I can't wait to hug you.
I can't wait to too. It's going to be so much fun. I'm telling you what, I'm signing up and coming to this one because I was looking at the pictures and the video from the last one, and I was like, oh my God, I want to go.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to check out the Enoughness Revolution or Wild and Holy Radio, you can find them both on my website, which is megan-hale.com. And then you can actually get on the wait list for my next retreat, which is called Wild and Holy Weekend, which is a short, intimate, 2.5-day retreat where so much powerful stuff happens. It's ridiculous. You can get on the wait list for that and be the first to know when I offer my next retreat. And I'll also be letting you know when the first big live event for 100 magical, powerful women to come together will be.
Woohoo! That's a new one. Oh my gosh. Okay, well, we don't have time to talk about that, but I'm going to want to hear about that one. All right, Megan, thank you so much. It has been an absolute joy to have you here, and I look forward to everything else, and good luck having that baby.
Thanks, Audrey.
Okay, thanks. And that's it for today's Story of the Shift, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Megan was great, and if you're interested in her Wild and Holy year that's upcoming, please check in her bio for the link to sign up to work with her. You won't regret it. Again, thanks for joining me. See ya. Hey everyone. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed it, or even if you didn't, hit that subscribe button and share it with your friends. You can follow me on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher at Women Are the Journey. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.